Imagine standing on the edge of a massive harbour, somewhere in Rotterdam or Singapore, as the sky begins to bruise with the colours of early evening. Before you, a container ship longer than the Shard is tall begins to slide away from the dock. 200,000 tons of steel stacked high with 20-foot boxes full of electronics, clothing and coffee beans. This ship has its own postcode, its own swimming pool, and engines that could power a small town. And yet, as you watch it creep into the channel, you notice something strange. Tucked against its enormous hull, like a pilot fish beside a whale, is a tiny tugboat, no bigger than a city bus, and somehow that small orange vessel is steering the giant, not pushing it with brute force, not towing it with some impossible cable, but gently, almost politely, redirecting its path. How? That is the question that seems to break the rules of physics. And the answer will change the way you think about force, water, and the hidden leverage that exists in plain sight. Let us start with what your eyes tell you. The tugboat is dwarfed by the ship. In a contest of pure mass, the tug would lose every single time. A typical harbour tug weighs around 500 tons. The ship is 400 times heavier. If the tug pushed directly against the side of the vessel, it would be like a child trying to stop a runaway lorry. The tug's propeller would churn the water into foam, the engine would scream, and the ship would barely notice. And yet, the ship turns. It obeys. So what are we missing? The answer lies not in the tug's strength, but in the ship's weakness. And that weakness is the very water it floats on. Here is where it gets interesting. A ship of 200,000 tons does not rest on the water like a coin on a table. It sits inside the water, displacing it. The vessel is so heavy that it pushes aside millions of liters of seawater, which push back with an enormous upward force called buoyancy. That is what keeps it afloat. But that same water also offers very little resistance to sideways motion. If you stand on the deck of a stationary supertanker and push against the railing with your hand, the ship will move. Not much, maybe a millimeter, but it will move. Because on water, the only thing stopping lateral motion is inertia and the drag of the hull. There is no friction gripping the bottom, no brake pads locking the wheels. The ship is, in effect, skating on a fluid surface. That is the hidden truth. A supertanker is not a boulder. It is a very, very heavy ice skater. But even a heavy skater has momentum. Once moving in a straight line, that 200,000 tons wants to keep moving in a straight line. Changing its direction requires a force, and a tiny tugboat does not have the raw power to create that force directly. So instead, the tug does something clever. It does not push the ship. It pushes the water around the ship. And that is the mental leap most people never make. Let us slow this down. The tugboat positions itself not at the center of the ship's side, but near the bow or the stern, depending on the maneuver. Then it angles its hull slightly away from the vessel. Its propeller, which is enclosed in a rotating pod called a Z-drive or azimuth thruster, blasts a powerful jet of water sideways. That jet strikes the curved surface of the ship's hull and is redirected. Newton's third law takes over. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The redirected water pushes back against the tug, but the tug is braced against the ship, so the force transfers into the vessel. However, the key detail is this. The tug is not applying force to the ship's center of mass. It is applying force at the very end of the ship, and that creates rotation. Just like pushing the end of a long shopping trolley, you do not need to be stronger than the trolley's mass. You just need to apply leverage at the right point. But wait, that still sounds like pushing. And we already said brute force pushing does not work. So what changes? The answer is time and water resistance. When the tug pushes at the stern, the ship begins to rotate very slowly. That rotation causes the bow to swing in the opposite direction. But here is the part that feels like magic. The ship's own massive hull, as it rotates, pushes against millions of tons of stationary water. That water pushes back, and that backward push helps turn the ship even more. The tug is not fighting the ship's inertia alone. It is using the ship's own size against itself. The larger the ship, the more water it must displace to turn, and that water provides a natural leverage point. The tug is simply the spark that starts the chain reaction. To truly understand this, you need to look at the tug's real weapon, not its engine, its propeller nozzle. Most people imagine a tugboat pushing with its bow, like a rugby player shoving a scrum. But that is rarely how it works. Modern tugboats are designed to pull sideways. They have Voith-Schneider propellers, or azimuth thrusters, that can direct thrust in any direction, instantly. Imagine standing on ice and holding a fire hose that can spray water in any direction. You do not push against the ice. You push against the water you throw. That is the tug. It creates a high-velocity jet that acts like a hydraulic lever. The jet hits the ship's hull, spreads out, and creates a zone of high pressure. The ship feels that pressure not as a single punch, but as a broad, steady shove across several square meters of steel. And because water is incompressible, that force transmits almost instantly. But here is the counterintuitive part. The tug is often not even touching the ship. In many maneuvers, especially in open water, the tug works at a distance. It positions itself alongside the vessel and blasts water directly at the hull without making contact. The jet of water travels through the gap, strikes the ship, and the recoil pushes the tug away. So the tug must constantly adjust its thrust angle to stay in position. It is like trying to push a friend on a swing by throwing a basketball at them while standing on a skateboard. The physics is chaotic, sensitive, and requires incredible skill from the captain. Yet, it works. And it works because the ship is not a solid block. It is a hollow shell floating on a nearly frictionless surface. The only thing keeping it on course is its own forward momentum and the water's gentle resistance. Let us test this with a real-world demonstration you can try at home. Fill a bathtub with water. Place a large plastic storage box upside down on the surface. That box is your supertanker. Now take a small plastic cup. That is your tugboat. If you push the side of the box with the cup, the box slides away, but does not turn much. That feels weak. Now place the cup near one corner of the box, angle it 45 degrees, and blow across the surface of the water toward the box. Or better, use a spoon to flick a jet of water at the corner. The box rotates immediately. You did not touch it. You moved the water, and the water moved the box. Scale that up by a factor of 10 million, and you have the harbour. The tug is just a sophisticated water-flicking machine.
But the true elegance of this system only reveals itself when conditions get dangerous. High winds, strong currents, crowded harbours. This is where the tug's role shifts from helper to lifeline. A 200,000-ton ship cannot stop quickly. Its stopping distance in an emergency is measured in kilometers. If its engines fail while entering a narrow channel, the ship does not coast to a gentle halt. It keeps moving for nearly half an hour. Without tugboats, it would grind into the dock, crumple a crane, or carve open a fuel barge. So the tug does not just turn the ship, it steals its momentum. It positions itself at the bow, angles its jets to push sideways and slightly backward, and creates drag. Not by grabbing the ship, but by shoving water against the direction of travel. That water piles up against the hull, creating a cushion of high pressure that slows the vessel from the front. It is like dropping an anchor made of liquid.
And here is the deepest insight of all. The tugboat is not fighting the ship's mass. It is fighting the ship's relationship with the water. Remove the water, put that ship on dry land, and no tug on earth could budge it. Add the water, and the ship becomes almost obedient. The tug simply changes the shape of the pressure field around the hull. It injects energy into the fluid, and the fluid carries that energy to the vessel. The ship turns because the water tells it to turn. The tug is just the interpreter. This is where common sense breaks down completely. We are taught that to move something heavy, you need something heavier. That to stop something big, you need something bigger. But fluid dynamics laughs at that rule. A tugboat wins not through strength, but through geometry and timing. It applies force at the longest possible lever arm. It uses the ship's own length to multiply its power. It harnesses the very water that supports the ship to also steer it. In physics terms, a tugboat delivering 40 tons of bollard pull at the stern of a 300-meter ship creates a turning moment equivalent to a force of nearly 12,000 tons applied at the center of the vessel. The tug is not small. It is a gearbox. It trades speed for leverage. Think about that for a moment. 40 tons becomes 12,000 tons. That is a multiplication factor of 300. No lever, no pulley, no hydraulic press on land can match that efficiency. And it happens because the ship is embedded in a fluid that transmits pressure equally in all directions. The tug pushes on a point. The water spreads that push across the entire hull. The ship turns as if gripped by an invisible hand the size of a football field. Now, watch a tugboat crew work next time you see one. Notice how the little vessel never strains. Its engine note changes, but it does not scream. Its wake boils, but it does not shake. The captain makes tiny adjustments with the joystick, angling the thrusters like a watchmaker adjusting a spring, and the giant ship responds, slowly, gracefully, as if it had wanted to turn all along. That is the illusion. The tug is not forcing the ship. It is reminding the ship that it floats. And on water, even 200,000 tons must listen to a whisper, if that whisper is spoken in the language of fluid pressure. So the next time someone tells you that size is power, you can smile. Because you now know a secret that harbor pilots have known for centuries. A small force applied at the right place, at the right time, through the right medium, can move mountains. Or in this case, a mountain of steel, cargo, and fuel, gliding silently toward the horizon, gently nudged by a tiny orange boat that refuses to be ignored. Music fades in, slow and deep. That is not just engineering. That is poetry, written in water.